When sorting and storing model parts for kit bashing, was there a system at ILM that was used in the model shop? If so, what was that system? And do you use a similar system now that you're not in a shared space environment? No, there wasn't a system. There were model kits. There were model, how do I say this? So what we're describing here is at Industrial Light and Magic, a lot of the spaceship detailing was done using existing model kits. This is a process called kit bashing. And at ILM, they had a loft, and there were several different, the model shop moved twice while I was working there. No, just once. But so there was a loft, and in the loft was shelves and shelves and shelves of model kits, usually just by category, right? There was military kits, Star Wars kits, etc. And what you would do is to do your final detailing, you'd go up into the loft with a pair of nippers and a tray. And you'd just you'd take your tray and you'd be like, okay, yeah, these look like good parts. And you'd basically just start snipping parts into the trays. Now that is for like a one-off, I need to go detail this thing. If you're doing a big production, like when we were getting started on Topoka City, all the domed buildings from episode 2, I think they made a big order specifically of a bunch of the Tamiya World War II kits, like the Anzio Annie and Flakvierling, a few of those tank models that yield very Star Wars specific parts. So they would do bulk orders for stuff like that at the beginning of a big production where they knew they wanted a lot of repetitive parts. And then there was stuff that they always had because it yielded so many great things. The Ertl Saturn V has supplied more topography to more spaceships than almost any other model kit. And it's hilarious that there's a ton of Ertl Star Wars kits up there too. So Star Wars using Star Wars for their detailing. It's a hilarious like Ouroboros of special effects detailing. It makes me very, very happy. Let's see here. Matt on the Moon has a really interesting question. His claim to fame is catching a t-shirt that I shot at him during a live show with Janie and Commander Hadfield. That would be our Toronto show. And that would be 2013, 14, somewhere in there. So we're in Toronto, and that's where Chris and his family are. I love him and his wife. They're such awesome human beings. So we got together there, and then Chris came on stage. And I had this head carpenter, Bob. Bob was like the anchor of our stage crew, and just an amazing, amazing human being. And Bob is also like unflappable, just what you want in a roadie, right? Just like Bob has seen everything, he's done everything, he's not impressed, and he's just getting the job done. Bob's particular talent was he remembered everyone's names in every theater. It was an incredible thing to watch. He'd just show up we'd show up at the Bakersfield Convention Center and he'd like know the 4 names of the dudes coming to unload the truck. What a skill. At any rate, Commander Hadfield came on stage and played with us. And then at the end of the night, I'm on the bus and we're watching Jeopardy, and Bob has just finished wrapping the set and he comes onto the bus and he's so psyched to have met Chris Hadfield, one of his heroes. And he goes, "Dude, Hadfield is on the money." And I said, "I know. Isn't he cool? Isn't he amazing?" And Bob's like, no, dude. And he pulls a Canadian bill out with an astronaut on it and he goes, "He's literally on the money." That happened that night. One of my favorite jokes I've ever heard in real life. But you had a question. In the supersonic ping pong episode, you looked more concerned than I ever remember seeing you when testing the cannon with the choke. What happened? I would have to watch that episode to see, but really, it's probably more like, it's more in the edit. Like, there was nothing that was stupid dangerous about that episode. All of the danger was fairly localized. So if I seem to be incredibly concerned, there's a whole bunch of reasons that could be. One could be genuine concern, but think it's probably more likely that it's like, my concern was not necessarily of safety, but it was also of like getting the rig done and also getting what we needed on camera. It also could be possible that Jamie was really pissing me off that day, and my pissed off face might look like I'm really concerned about something else. That's certainly feasible. Yeah, that definitely happened. It is amazing that we got to spend so much time making MythBusters. 13 years, 18,000 hours spent on camera over all of that time. Just insane amount of time. And it's like, I am overwhelmed by the fact of it. When I look over the list, I cannot believe how much we all got done. It seems impossible. It seems like a bizarre carve out of the world that television, that a network spent so much money allowing us to do such weird crap for so long. Just the best. And you know, every now and then, ChaosGenerator asks this question. Oh, sorry, Chaos. ChaosGenerator. Today I learned that chaos and chads are just one letter apart, like Alice and Slice. ChaosGenerator has a question about technology evolving and science is a continuous journey of discovery, and asking, are there any MythBusters project that may be dated today? And if given the chance to work on the science and technology, would you go back, given the privilege of having your disposable, of having of doing the show again? And the answer is, it's really, I don't long, yeah, I don't long for being back on a set with a problem to solve, as much fun as that was. And getting to do that recreationally a couple of years ago with Bobby Fingers and Gavin and Dan, the slow-mo guys, was so much fun. But it also made it so clear to me how dangerous so much of what we were doing was, and how safety was like such an important part of the job that the whole team was doing. And it's not to me to build dangerous things in here by myself. So when I think about, so I just really don't even put my mind on thinking of stuff that I would like to do with the old machine that we built together for solving mythical problems. And to be fair, I think my MythBuster crew, like, they're all off doing cool stuff, man. A half dozen of them are over at Google X. Yeah. And each one of our producers, every single one, just built such an incredible skill base over that time. It's really been fun to see their careers post the show. Wastelandreaper wants to know, back during the Diet Coke and Mentos episode, why did I put that bottle of Coke on the lathe? I love that people are still asking this 20 years later. I'm never going to tell people why I put that bottle of Coke on the lathe. The great Brandino wants to talk about light and magic, and they saw one of the guys mentioned on Empire that he was fond of cheats, and the hyperdrive gets fixed and the Falcon escapes, and the ship in the dot is a Polaroid on a piece of glass moving away from the camera. Yeah, I love that. They didn't have the space to film the model getting as small as they wanted, so that was the solution. And of course, right, it's just like 4 frames or something like that at that point. Do you have any favorite cheats? It's funny, one of my favorite Star Wars cheats is also from Empire, and it's also about the Millennium Falcon, and it's the shot where you see where the Star Destroyer turns and you see the Millennium Falcon on it, and I believe they just took a photo of the Millennium Falcon and cut it out and put it on the model for that. Again, you'll never notice, and that made me so supremely happy that they had built that they were just using a photo of it. You should know that, like, on a motion control shoot, which, you know, any ship is a motion control shoot, but also like the Droid Factory in episode 2, there's Padme goes through this Busby Berkeley kind of Bugs Bunny sequence in the droid factory. And all of those conveyor belts and uprights were actually modular pieces that the model shop built. We could assemble them in 5 layers over 10 feet wide. And so there were master shots, and then there were close-ups and punch-ins. And for any one of those shots, the director of photography, Marty, would look through the camera and he'd be like, he'd call you over and look at this monitor. You see this part? That looks boring. You make that more interesting. And then you'd go get a pencil and sometimes you just color in and make that part darker so it stood out. Or you grabbed a little frisket, made a little pattern and you gave a little spray paint. We were adjusting shots to camera every single shot. And the 13th man, THIR13ENTHMAN, I don't know how you pronounce that, says, what are some of your favorite world building details from film and television? I'm going to have to think about this and answer it another time because you gave me such a good one. In Severance, they say, the keyboards that the characters use do not have an escape key. That's freaking wonderful. Replicating some Lumen hardware is a long-term goal of mine. I've gone down that path a couple of times, but haven't pulled the trigger on it. But yeah, I'd love a working Lumen computer. Yeah, that would be so amazing.
Thank you for watching. I wanted to talk to you about Tested membership. The Tested members are a key community that we find really, really remarkable. That's very separate from Tested and from YouTube. The Tested members, they buy each other memberships during our live streams. So if you're wondering whether to become a member, watch one of our live streams and someone may just give you one. It is hard to overestimate how much the Tested members actually make possible on this channel. They give us a lot of wiggle room. They give us a huge amount of feedback.
That's a member right now.
Thank you so much for enjoying your membership. Description for everything you need to know. And for all the members out there, thank you, thank you, thank you.